Hello everyone, I'm Crystal BlackCreek Carlisle, Onyinyechi-Chipo. I'm here to talk to you about my new book, Free Jazz Improvisation, a continuum from Africa to Congo Square, from early jazz to bebop, and the return to mysticism for communal healing and transcendence beyond oppression. This book tells the whole history of not only jazz, but all of the music of the African-American music traditions, originating from the African origins, which were for healing purposes originally. It deals with the whole history of jazz, and then spends a great deal of deals a great deal with the healing purposes of the free jazz or avant-garde movement, and it includes interviews with the great Ornette Coleman, Archie Shepp, and it includes and those are personal interviews that I did directly with those people, with them, and it also includes research and interviews from many of the greats of that period, of the free jazz improvisation period, and which I know that many of those innovators would not use the word free jazz. They had their own terms and their own approaches to the music, and they would simply call it music, or they would have a special term, like Ornette Coleman would state homerlotics for his approach, or audio-physio-psychic music was Yusuf Lateef's approach. So I just wanted to give you a brief understanding of what this book is really about. It deals with scholarship and the debate on even the denial of the African and African-American origins of the music itself, or all the forms of American music, what we term American music, which is actually African-American music, including the blues, jazz, rock, R&B, and hip-hop, and gospel, and all the forms that they influence. So just to give you some idea of what's covered in the book, it deals with the African context, which is the historical, cultural, spiritual origins of African-derived music, the African mythological origins of music, song, and the drum, which describes from the storytelling tradition the healing purposes of the drum, healing purposes of the music, period, and song. It deals with African-derived instruments, African origins of music for spiritual purposes, spiritual and healing purposes. It deals with the African origins of the elements of jazz, African elements such as improvisation in all African-derived music, African element of collective improvisation, syncopation, the African element of call and response, the importance of the drum and percussiveness, which is another element of jazz in all African-derived musics. The importance, we deal also with the importance of the drum for community healing in Africa, or the Ngoma traditions, African element of tone alteration and pitch bending, the African element of the blue note, repetition, communal spirit, and the oral tradition, or the element of the griot or the bard in West African traditions in particular, the storytellers. In the U.S. context part of the book, that I termed the Black Atlantic African Diaspora, we deal with the subjects such as from Africa to the African Diaspora, resistance as performance and memory in ceremonies such as carnival, Mardi Gras, second line, and drumming. So we found ways to continue our traditions, and I deal with the relatedness of Mardi Gras and carnival to masquerading, which is still practiced in Nigeria and Nigerian traditions. So we deal with Mardi Gras second line and drumming, out of which came from the Congo Square drumming, spiritual ceremonies, and singing and chanting, came the second line and jazz funeral traditions, and from that the tradition of jazz, what we term jazz, but something that really cannot be defined or labeled. We deal with African culture improvised as creolization in the diaspora as what we term jazz. The cultural, political, spiritual significance of Congo Square, which there were more than one origin really simultaneously in the U.S. Other areas brought root to what we call jazz as well. And some of that is discussed here as well. From Mardi Gras to jazz funerals, second line to early jazz. And then the next chapter deals with the social-political perspectives of free jazz. From bebop to free jazz, jazz and its creators demand respect. And that was the beginning of the bebop period, which gave birth to the free jazz or avant-garde period. Then it was free jazz as resistance, a partially political response to oppression. Civil rights, it deals with the civil rights, bebop and free jazz. Free jazz's return to Africa for racial and cultural identity, and incorporation of the world musics, which began with the free jazz avant-garde movement of people like Coltrane and others. Let's see. Jazz redefined. Jazz as self-definition and the power of self-naming for freedom, where many people began to connect with their African culture, African-American culture, and have pride and have African names and African, sounding or in particular African-American naming traditions, and sometimes African Muslim names. Dual meanings, oral tradition in jazz and life to transcend oppression. The oral tradition, which had a lot of dual meaning, which is something that we did, having more than one meaning for words, and redefining for ourselves words, just as people continue to do today with the debate for the N-word and things like that. And just as people did during slavery, have double meaning to words, and the songs of spirituals that had a meaning for that we were escaping, but it was under the guise of this song that no one knew the true meaning of unless you were an enslaved African. In the cultural perspective, the free jazz history, culture, and spirit, it dealt with the free jazz innovators, elements, and significance, all the interviews of the different leaders of the movement and innovators, empowerment and creativity, free jazz collectives for communities such as Horace Tapscott's Pan-African Orchestra, inspired by Sun Ra's work, his orchestra, the AACM and various, out of Chicago, and the various collectives in New York and different places. We dealt with the various free jazz artists, their music and their approach. There was notes on Cecil Taylor, one of the originators of the free jazz, avant-garde music, notes on John Coltrane, notes on Ornette Coleman, then the interviews that I did with both Archie Shepp and Ornette Coleman, and then deals with the political aspect from all the way from Du Bois, who dealt with the need to value our own cultural capital, and as well as our economics, build ourselves economically as people post-slavery, just at the end of slavery. So there's a chapter that says from Du Bois to Coleman, beyond aesthetic racism to respect for humanity. Anyway, there's just so much. It deals with free jazz drumming, and it talks about where there's drummings, there is resistance, and sort of relates back to the Haitian Revolution and the fact that we were remembering our own culture, our history, and our spirituality through the drummer, and also at Congo Square. So, in other places, deals with many of the writings of the greatest scholars at that time, Amiri Baraka, who is also known as Leroy Jones, and others. Then finally, there's a couple more chapters, but we deal with improvisation, its elements, purposes, and its uses in the free jazz. Creativity improvised, the intuitive art of composing on the spot, improvisation as a way of life for jazz musicians and as a way of life for Africans in general, improvising, recreating their instruments that they were familiar with in a new place, recreating themselves, recreating their culture to the best of their ability, their culture, their spirituality, continuing. Therapeutic, psychological perspectives, the healing benefits of free jazz as therapy for positive self-identity, protection and resistance. And that's basically as a hedge against any oppression. Therapeutic values of collective communal gathering, which is the spirit of jazz. There's no jazz without community, and the audience is a part of the is involved with the music as well. There's no separation usually between audience and performance, which is an African element of oneness, an African element of communal, gathering and healing in community. Then we're dealing with the spiritual perspective of free jazz, the mystical and spiritual healing aspects, improvisation as meditation and ritual in performance. And finally, I deal with the summaries and my take and my experience and how it affected me. And anyway, I just hope that you will enjoy this book, The Free Jazz Improvisation. Again, my name is BlackCreek Carlisle, Onyinyechi-Chipo. You can find this book on Amazon. You can Google me at YouRSpirit, YourSpirit.org, YourSpirit.net. I have a store also, YourSpirit, at Square Up. So you can purchase the book through Square Up, or you could go directly to my website, YourSpirit.org, and it will give you the links to the website. Or Google my name, YourSpirit, or BlackCreek Carlisle. Blessings, everyone.